We're as pleased as a cowboy in a saloon that you've decided to tie up your horse and join us this week as we go out west to take a look at some cowboy vocabulary. Welcome to...
Aprender inglés con Reza y Craig.
Yeah! Hello, I'm Craig.
And I'm Reza.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching English between us, we're going to help you improve your English and take all aspects of your English, the grammar, the vocabulary, and the pronunciation up to the next level. How are you doing, Reza?
I'm fine, Craig. I've recovered after my outburst. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be speaking about cowboys with you this week, all about cowboy vocabulary and the wild, wild west. But before we go out west and speak about cowboys, we'd like to tell you about something we like, italki. italki sponsor this podcast, and they have a very good website that helps to connect students like you with teachers who can help you with your English. How do they do that? They do that one-to-one using Skype or similar software. So you connect on Skype and the teacher works with you, improving your English on the internet on a day and at a time that's convenient for you. There are all kinds of teachers, many different prices to choose from, and you can see a video presentation of the teachers before you decide which teacher you're going to study with. If you would like to find out more information, go to our website, that's inglespodcast.com/270 for this episode. Just click on the italki link. That will take you to their website, and you will get a $10 italki credit to go towards your lessons when you pay for your first lesson with your teacher. Reza and I have both used this service to study French and Spanish, and we like it very much. And please, if you have taken advantage of this special offer, please let us know if you're happy with the service, what you like about it, maybe what you don't like, so that we can tell them, because we do believe in this service if you're looking for a private teacher. And Reza and I would like to thank italki for sponsoring this podcast.
Okay, Craig. Shall we saddle up and get going?
Well, let's look at saddle up first. What's a saddle?
A saddle, S-A-D-D-L-E, is where you sit on a horse. So you have to have your own saddle. You put it on top of the horse. It's like a mobile seat, and that's where you sit. So to saddle up with the preposition is a phrasal verb, and it means to get on the saddle. So it's a metaphor for let's get started.
Okay,
let's saddle up.
Let's saddle up and get to the vocabulary. So in the West, in cowboy films and westerns is the name for the genre of films where cowboys and cowgirls appear. So if you're watching cowboys and Indians and cowgirls and ranches and that kind of thing, you're probably watching a western. That's the name of the genre. And it's quite common in western towns to see a jail, J-A-I-L, which is kind of like a prison. But there is a difference between a prison and a jail, isn't there?
Yes, for me, a jail is more of a temporary place.
Exactly.
So like in a little western village or town, they'll have a jail where they're going to hold the prisoner temporarily, but not for a long period of time. And later, if they need to be held for longer, they'll be sent to the prison for a longer time.
Yeah, that's not a word that's common in British English, jail. You might hear the word holding cell in a police station, and then after the trial, if the accused is guilty, then they would go to prison. So jail is more common in American English, and it's the temporary prison.
Craig, who's in charge of the prisoners in the Western jail?
That will be the sheriff. S-H-E-R-I-F-F, the sheriff.
Now, the sheriff is not a word which is only specific to cowboys, although it's a very typical word that we associate with cowboys, but it's actually a very old English word. It goes way, way back to the Middle Ages in England when they had sheriffs, people who were in control of the laws or what was accepted as right or wrong.
Well, there's the famous Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood.
Yeah. The Sheriff of Nottingham was very bad, wasn't he? So
Yeah.
Robin Hood attacked him. He was an unfair sheriff. Craig, in a famous song, somebody, what was it?
Shot the sheriff.
Shot the sheriff? But who did they not shoot?
I shot the sheriff, said Eric Clapton, but I did not shoot the deputy. So the deputy, also very common in westerns, is the person who helps the sheriff. The deputies are second in command, the assistants of the sheriff.
Craig, I'm sure the listeners are dying to hear us sing a little bit of that song, just to clarify that. Oh,
After you.
ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot no deputy.
No. Fantastic song. Now, it's really, really funny to me that when you watch westerns, you see the outlaw, which is the person who has broken the law, the gunfighter, the outlaw, and the outlaw rides away on his horse, and the sheriff has to chase him. So he needs lots of deputies. So he takes a badge, BADGE, which in Spanish is placa, I think.
And what form is that badge usually?
It's usually a star, isn't it? It's a star, it's a badge, it's an official insignia. And they say, okay, you, and they just pin a badge or put a badge on these men, and suddenly they are official policemen of the sheriff. So no test, no background check, nothing like that, just you're a deputy, follow me.
And it's just made me think of another word that I hadn't thought of previously. The group of people's, the posse.
Yes,
Posse.
the posse.
Posse, the posse. Mm-hmm. That's a word that sometimes gets used in modern English, but in a totally different way. It's like American slang for like my friends, my mates who hang out with me, you know?
Mi
Which
grupo.
is chilling. Estoy con los míos, estoy con mis amiguitos, my posse. I'm with my posse.
You hear it in rap songs sometimes. I'm just hanging with my posse, man. I'm hanging with my posse.
And Craig, where might be a typical place that the posse and the sheriff and his men have to go to look for the baddies?
Well, they might be on the ranch, or in American English, the pronunciation would be ranch. The ranch is the ranch is the rancho, or the hacienda, where the people live. So on the ranch, you'd expect to find animals and cowboys and cattle.
What are cattle?
Cattle is a group name for animals like cows and bulls and oxen. One ox, two or more oxen.
That's buey, isn't it?
That's buey, yeah. So the plural is quite different. It's en, oxen, for more than one ox. And yeah, any animal basically with horns, cuernos, and with particular kind of feet, they will be classed as cattle.
Now, of course, there were no cars in the days of the cowboys, but they did talk about driving cattle. What did they mean when they said to drive cattle?
Well, that doesn't mean that they put the cows and the bulls in the car. That means that they get them to run and get them to move in a particular direction. Say, for example, your ranch is in Valencia and you want to sell your cattle in Madrid. You have to get your cattle, your animals, from Valencia to Madrid. So you drive your cattle. And the name for that is a cattle drive. A cattle drive.
Of course, in the Western films, though, they're never in Valencia, Madrid. The typical places, they seem to be always driving cattle from like Texas to Oklahoma or somewhere.
Yeah.
It always seems to include Texas. Somewhere in the Western film, Texas will be mentioned.
And Arizona.
And
Two Stone, Arizona.
Yeah, it's always Texas and Arizona in those films.
So when they drive the cattle, they have to round them up. The phrasal verb to round up cattle is juntar. They get them all together. So they round them up. It's a phrasal verb that you can separate. So you put the object in the middle. Round the cattle up or round them up and drive them to a city.
It was a very risky business, driving cattle, because there were a lot of baddies out there, a lot of bad cowboys who wanted to try and steal your cattle. And there's a specific name for that. We call it rustling. Cattle rustling. That's rustling. In Australia, they call it duffing, because it still happens today. Not only in Australia, but you hear of it in Britain and Ireland as well from time to time. That one farmer steals another farmer's cattle. It still does happen today. Mm-hmm. And that's called cattle rustling.
Did I tell you the story about brown paper Bob?
No.
Because rustling has two meanings. It can mean to steal cattle, or it can mean to make noise with a piece of paper. If I take a piece of paper and I do this, that's rustling the paper. So brown paper Bob, I walked into a saloon. A saloon in the Wild West was a place where you could drink and maybe sleep with women, if that was your thing.
For free?
No, paying. So a saloon was a wild place of drinking and gambling and wild women. So I walked into a saloon and there was a man standing next to me, and he was wearing a brown paper hat. And he was wearing a brown paper shirt with a brown paper waistcoat. Brown paper shoes and boots, brown paper trousers, brown paper gloves. And he told me that he'd just come out of prison, just come out of jail. And I said, why did you go to jail? He said, rustling.
It had to be. It had to be.
Brown paper Bob. When cattle run very fast, uncontrollably, and they're running wild, that's called a stampede. Estampida, stampede. Stampede. And cattle stampeding can be very scary.
I guess it comes from the verb to stamp, S-T-A-M-P. And that's a verb which has several meanings, but the meaning we're interested in is when an animal or a person with force puts their foot on the ground. Let's say you're really, really angry. You've heard something that really annoys you. You might stamp your foot on the ground. Put your foot on the ground with a lot of force. So stampede is when the feet are coming down hard on the ground and you don't want to be under those feet. Right. That's a stampede. A wagon is a word that will sound more or less familiar to you. If you're Spanish, you talk about un vagón and a train wagon. Yes, you can say a train wagon or a train carriage. But in the olden days of the original cowboys, it was this vehicle which was pulled by horses. So un carro in Spanish. That was the original cowboy wagon.
Cowboys and cowgirls used to shoot each other quite often, according to the stereotype in westerns. And how did they shoot each other? Well, they could use a pistol, which is very similar in Spanish, pistola, or a rifle. A rifle is a long gun, un rifle.
Yeah.
So a rifle and a pistol were used. And where did the cowboy or cowgirl keep his or her pistol? Well, they had a special gun belt and a holster for the gun. Holster, Holster, is funda. Funda de la pistola is a holster, a gun holster.
So that was a very important item of clothing, or maybe you might say piece of equipment or accessory for all cowboys to have.
Did you have a pistol when you were a child?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Me too. I used to practice in front of the mirror to try and see how quickly I could draw my pistol.
To draw?
Draw, not
with a pen?
Not dibujar, no. Huh? To draw means to pull out of the holster. So you draw your pistol and then shoot. And I used to practice, and I think I used to put butter or grease on the holster so that the gun came out quicker. I remember that.
Oh, good. Did you get that tip from a cowboy film or something?
I think my dad told me to try it. He put something, or maybe wax from candles, cera, wax, on the holster, which made it softer and smoother, and the gun came. And I used to practice for hours and hours and hours, drawing my gun and spinning the pistol on my finger and putting it back in the holster.
What? Listeners, this is news to me. I did not know this.
Well, you were busy studying flags when I was doing that.
Yeah, so. True. I had no idea. I knew that Billy the Kid and Doc Holliday and these people, they were the fastest draw, the people to take their gun out fastest from the holster in the West. But the fastest draw in the West was Billy the Kid, I think. But I had no idea that Craig Whelan was the fastest draw in Essex.
Yes, I was.
I had no idea.
Sure was. When cowboys or cowgirls are working with cattle and herding cattle, bringing them together.
Did I hear herding? Is herd to hear?
A herd, H-E-R-D, is a group of cattle. So the verb to herd is to bring them together into one group. So to herd cattle is to collect them in one place.
What would be the past of to herd?
Herded.
So it's not at all the same to say, I heard them as I herded them.
No, different verb.
Which one might the cowboys say?
They would say herded. So the infinitive H-E-R-D to herd cattle and the past tense herded.
So they put the cows into a group. They herded them.
So you could say, I heard the cowboy herding the cattle.
You get that, listeners? We're not making it up. It's true. It's really true.
And when they need to catch the cow or the bull, they used rope with a loop on the end of the rope. A loop is a circle. So that was called a lasso, which is similar in Spanish, lazo. A lasso, L-A-S-S-O. And it's also a verb, to lasso the cattle, to lasso the cows.
Once you've lassoed the bull, as everybody knows, you've got to take the bull by the horns. Everyone should know that because the horns are the dangerous bit, as Spanish speakers know. So once you get that lasso on it, take the bull by the horns.
That's also an idiom. What does it mean?
It means take control of the situation, because if not, it's going to get out of control.
Yeah. Our neighbours are making a lot of noise today and it's difficult to podcast. So I think I'm going to take the bull by the horns and go and speak to them about it.
Or we could send out the posse to give them a warning.
Yeah, let's send a posse.
Now, Craig, you come from the southeast of England. You certainly will have heard of Spurs Football Club.
Spurs is a nickname for Tottenham Hotspur.
But if a cowboy talks about Spurs, do you think he's talking about football or soccer?
Probably not talking about London football. Spurs to a cowboy probably means espuelas, the things on your boots, attached to your boot for riding a horse. You dig the spurs into the horse, which always seemed very cruel to me, and that makes the horse go faster. I suppose these days they'd use a whip, látigo.
Craig, I've always thought you're a very nice chap.
Thank you very much.
Es un tío muy majo, Craig. He's a nice chap. But cowboys have other sorts of chaps, don't they, Craig?
Yes, chaps, C-H-A-P-S. What are chaps? Chaps, that's the leather, pieces of leather that cowboys and cowgirls wear on top of their trousers, or jeans probably, to when they're riding horses. So it protects their legs against rubbing on the horse. Possibly that's why we sometimes have chapped lips. Because if your lips are chapped, then they're very sore and very dry. So possibly there's a connection, I'm not sure. But chaps for a cowboy, the leather half trousers that cowboys wear when they're riding horses. They help to ride horses. And in Spanish, I think they're tajones or chaparreras in Mexico.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of these words in English, like chaps and like ranch, probably came more from Mexican Spanish than Spanish.
Yeah.
Because rancho, you'd probably say that in Mexico, I guess. Chaparreras, the cowboys got it from Mexico, which, Mexico and the United States used to be more or less the same country. It was only quite recently they really decided where the border would be.
Yeah, there's a very big cowboy culture in Mexico because a lot of original cowboys were in Mexico. So definitely a lot of the words come from Mexican Spanish.
Craig, you mentioned that these chaps would be worn over jeans.
Probably.
Yeah, don't forget that the first kind of big important group of people who wore jeans were the cowboys. Long before trendy wearing of jeans by teenagers in urban cities was invented, people way out in the countryside in Texas and Arizona in the middle of nowhere were wearing jeans for heavy duty work.
That's right. And I learned one thing doing research for this podcast, and there's a very popular very popular make of jeans called Wrangler, Wranglr. And I did not know that a wrangler is a person on a ranch or a person on a cattle drive who takes care of the horses.
Oh, neither did
Looks after the horses. So a wrangler is a person who works with horses.
Oh, wow. Now I understand why they're called Wrangler jeans.
I thought it was probably the surname of the person who invented the company, but apparently it has a real meaning.
Wow. And Craig, if you're going to wear proper clothes like the jeans and the gun belt with the holster and all that, what have you got? You've got to put something on your head if you're a real cowboy.
Yeah, you've got to wear a 6-gallon hat. That's one of those big, high, tall hats. Very common in Texas, apparently. They're called 6-gallon hats, probably because they can hold 6 gallons of water, I'm guessing.
And as Craig says, even today in Texas, you often see men wearing what we might call cowboy hats, but people just going to work in downtown Dallas sometimes wear a cowboy hat.
The cowboy image, I think you'll possibly agree, they have a kind of very simple but very realistic view of the world. And there are some sayings and idioms that come from cowboys that I really, really like because they tend to simplify life and give a very unique way of looking at things. For example, all hat and no cattle. What do you think that means? If you say, oh, this new guy at work, this new guy who's just joined the company, he's all hat and no cattle. What do you think that means?
Well, I'd never heard it before. I'm guessing it's someone who talks a lot, but they don't have much to show for it. So big hat, yeah, look at me, I look important. But where are your cows? No cattle. So a lot of talk, but not much to back it up.
Yeah, someone with a big mouth. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it means. I really like that. Yeah, he's all hat. He's all hat and no cattle. What about someone who shoots from the hip? Hip is cadera. Someone who shoots a gun from the hip. What kind of person is that?
That's a very common expression used all over the English-speaking world, and that is to do something without much thought or preparation. Because if you're going to shoot a gun, it's better to raise it up to where you can look at it well with your eye.
Where you can aim.
Yeah. Point it at where you're going to shoot. But if you shoot from the hip, so you take it out of the holster and immediately shoot without putting it near your eye, well, that could go badly wrong. So if you shoot from the hip, you haven't prepared something very carefully.
I hadn't heard this before, but I really like it. Something is as rare as rocking horse droppings. As rare as rocking horse droppings. Rare is unusual, poco visto. And a rocking horse is often a toy for a child, a horse that you can sit on and that moves backwards and forwards. It rocks from the front to the back. And droppings would be the excrement or the dung coming from a horse. So if something is really, really unusual, you could say it's as rare as rocking horse droppings. In other words, it doesn't exist. It's like a blue moon.
The next expression is bite the dust. It's a very common expression which goes back to cowboy times. There's a lot of dust in the areas where cowboys work, polvo. So if you bite the dust, means die. You fall to the ground, you're dead, and I guess the dust goes into your mouth. So to bite the dust can mean to die or to fail. Whatever you tried to do didn't work.
Another one bites the dust.
The famous Queen song. Yeah.
Another one bites the dust. A one-horse town. I've been to a few one-horse towns in Spain, actually. A one-horse town is a place that's very, very basic with few comforts. So it could be a way to describe a very dull, very boring, very slow-moving and basic rural town that's nothing special, nothing to do, maybe a bit boring. It's a one-horse town.
A drugstore cowboy.
Had you heard of that before?
I'd heard of it before, but to be honest, I wasn't quite sure what it meant.
Me neither.
But apparently it means a fashionably, a well-dressed man who hangs around public places trying to pick up, to chat up, ligar, women. That is a drugstore cowboy.
So a man who wears nice clothes and just goes shopping, maybe, for the purpose of meeting a woman.
So, alguien que intenta ligar.
Okay. Yep, to pick up, ligar. Another popular expression with horses, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I use that with students sometimes. You can show them things, show them exam technique, show them explain grammar, but if they don't study and practice, they're not going to improve. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can't force people to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah, I love that expression. I would put that in probably my top 3 expressions of all time as lessons of life that we never learn.
Mm-hmm. But it's true with parents and children and loved ones, people we're close to. You want the best for them. You want them to do something in a particular way or make particular decisions. And you can explain that to them. You can lead them to the water, but you can't make them do it. You can't make them drink.
Horses are very stubborn, very obstinate animals. If they don't want to drink, they won't drink.
This expression or this saying I had not heard, but I saw it on a website. I like it very much. Reza, the quickest way to double your money is to fold it over and put it back into your pocket. To fold is doblar. So the phrasal verb to fold it over, to fold it from one side to the other side. That's the quickest way to double your money, make twice as much money. Just fold it over and put it back in your pocket. I like that.
That's a clever one. We found another one, typical of cowboys. Never drive black cattle in the dark.
Because you can't see them. Yeah,
Simple
makes sense.
but true.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very straightforward philosophy, very simple. It's better to keep your mouth shut and look stupid than open it and prove it. It's better to keep your mouth shut and look stupid than open it and prove it. Prove that you're stupid.
Now, the next one we found, I must admit I'm not familiar with it and I'm not exactly sure what it means. Let's see what you think. Never ask a barber if you need a haircut.
Well, of course, because what's he going to say? Yes, because he wants the money. So in general terms, that means don't ask a professional person who does something for a living if you need their service. Probably, unless they're very, very honest, they're going to say, yes, of course. So there's another use of cowboy in more modern English, isn't there? You could, you've been doing your flat up.
Yep.
Reformas, you've been doing up your flat. Have you had any cowboys working on it?
Thankfully, no, but I've certainly heard of stories of cowboy builders, cowboy workmen, cowboy traders. If you're a cowboy workman, you're highly unprofessional. You're an unprofessional tradesman. You are not good at the trade, at the business you do. Sadly, there are some cowboys out there.
So that's quite a negative use of the word. I don't know why it would be negative. Perhaps because cowboys have a reputation of being wild and not very careful about what their actions, perhaps.
Maybe they shoot from the hip.
They shoot from the hip.
What about the expression, Craig? Too many chefs and not enough Indians or Indians.
Too many chefs and not enough Indians. That will be, for example, where there might be too many people giving orders, but not many people wanting or willing to do the work. For example, in the street, you might have one person digging a hole. The dig is cavar, digging a hole in the ground, and 4 bosses around telling that person how to dig the hole. That will be too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
Yeah. I've actually worked for a very well-known organization where that was exactly the situation. Have you?
Are you going to name it?
Oh, no. But I have.
Do you still work for them?
No further comment.
Trying to get you in trouble there. So who's your favourite real cowboy or cowboy actor of all time, Reza?
Although it's a cliche, although it's very obvious, I do like Clint Eastwood as a cowboy actor. I think he's good.
Me too. I think he's very, very good.
He was a good, tough guy. He was tough. Un tipo duro, tough guy. I liked him. I also liked Lee Van Cleef. Mm-hmm. Remember him?
Yep, with the moustache.
Moustache, yeah.
I really like John Wayne. He's a classic cowboy in films like Rio Bravo. He's just amazing. And he speaks very slowly, so you can understand his English if you want to watch John Wayne films in original version. And I'm sure you'll hear some of the vocabulary we've mentioned before. What about famous westerns, famous cowboy films and westerns? Do you have any of those?
You've mentioned a few already. Did you say Rio
Bravo?
Rio Bravo, that's a classic one. Battle of Little Big Horn, all these things. But my favorite one is slightly less conventional, although it's a very popular film. I really like the film The Wild Bunch.
Me too.
I think it's a fantastic film.
Yep.
You know, the fact that it's a cowboy genre is irrelevant. It's just a really good film.
Let's give some more recommendations for listeners who would like to watch westerns. Now you've got the taste for some of the vocabulary, and please watch them in English. Quentin Tarantino has made 2 very good cowboy films. Hateful Eight was his last one, Tarantino's last cowboy film. Before that, there was Django, which was very, very good. Have you seen Django?
I haven't seen Hateful Eight, but I've seen Django. I really enjoyed that.
Me too.
That was good.
Some more recommendations. We mentioned Clint Eastwood. Unforgiven is one of my favourite Eastwood films with Gene Hackman. Unforgiven. Of course, the classic High Noon with Gary Cooper. All of these films will be linked in the show notes. That was Gary Cooper, and Grace Kelly was in High Noon. And of course, how can we not mention Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid?
Oh, yeah.
With Robert Redford and Paul Newman. And the finale, of course, was in Mexico.
Yeah, another classic. I've just thought of another. The Magnificent Seven.
Yes.
Of course. Los Siete Magníficos in Spanish.
Yul Brynner. Yeah, lots of famous actors in that.
Yeah. Craig, what do you think of spaghetti westerns?
I like them. The good, the bad, and the ugly for a few dollars more. Yep. Many of them were filmed in Spain, in Almeria.
Yeah, it's curious. They call them spaghetti westerns, so you think, oh, Italian. Yes, some of them were filmed in parts of Italy, but a lot of the shooting, I don't mean of guns, I mean the shooting of cameras.
And guns.
Yeah, it was done in Spain, particularly Almeria, because it was good kind of desert territory. So actually, spaghetti westerns are nearly as Spanish as they are Italian.
Maybe they called them spaghetti westerns because of the director, Sergio Leone. I think he was Italian.
Well, he wasn't the only spaghetti western director, but he was certainly the most famous. There were several. For about 15 years, there were lots and lots of spaghetti westerns. We mentioned Clint Eastwood. He started off in spaghetti westerns when he was relatively unknown. Before he became famous, he agreed to do spaghetti westerns shot in Spain and Italy. And then when he became more famous, he just decided to film more in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'd like to mention 2 more recommendations for people who want to watch westerns. Have you seen True Grit with Jeff Bridges? True Grit.
I haven't. No.
Very, very good film. And the other recommendation, Tombstone. Tombstone is a very good film, especially if you like moustaches, bigotes, because everybody in the film pretty much has a moustache. And that's with Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, who's Doc Holliday. And Kurt Russell plays Wyatt Earp, who's a very famous lawman, saloon keeper, gambler, gunslinger. A gunslinger is someone who uses their gun a lot. And that's also a very good film to watch.
Craig mentioned a cliche in that film, which I like very much. Most of the cowboys have moustaches or beards. That's very much a cliche of westerns, that they have moustaches, big moustaches, or beards. Are there any other cliches you can think of which tend to appear in western films? Any lines or any looks or any typical scenes?
There's go for your gun or I'll fill you full of lead. Can you think of any?
An expression, an adjective to call someone a yellow belly.
A yellow belly.
Yeah, if you're a coward, un cobarde, and you won't fight, your opponent say, why, you're a yellow belly. Barriga amarilla.
Or you're yellow.
Just yellow, the color yellow. Yeah, it's associated with being a coward.
He's not fighting, he's yellow. Oh, there's another one. Head them off at the pass.
Oh, yes. That's a classic,
Well,
isn't it?
head them off at the pass.
The pass, that's where you catch them.
Yes, where you catch the Indians.
And one that I think is a cliche, but it might be more my own imagination. Whenever the cowboys stop at the ranch and the kind ladies look after them, they say, "That's mighty fine coffee, ma'am." When they're given a nice cup of coffee, because they're very polite. They may kill each other and be a bit rough with each other, but they're very polite with the ladies.
What does mighty fine mean?
Mighty fine, that's very good. That's mighty fine coffee, man.
Oh, and one more recommendation for a Western comedy. Have you seen Blazing Saddles by Mel Brooks?
Yeah, of course, I'd forgotten about that. That's kind of its own subcategory, isn't it? A Western comedy is a rare thing.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Definitely recommended. All of these recommendations will be in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/270. And now we would like to hear from you. It's your turn to practice your English. We would like you to send us a voice message. Tell us your name. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what your favourite westerns are and what you think of this genre. And your voice messages can be sent either by going to speakpipe.com, that's speakpipe/Ingles podcast, or just record your voice and attach it to an email. Where can listeners send emails, Reza?
You can write to us. If you were a cowboy, you would have sent a telegram, but that would take too long these days. We'd prefer you to send an email, and you can send that to craig@inglespodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you're looking for an audio course or a specific course to study with over the summer period, go to store.mansioningles.net, where you'll find downloadable courses.
As usual, we'd like to thank all of our sponsors on the Patreon program. They are the people who, for as little as $1 per month, help to sponsor us, and in return, they get instant access to recent transcriptions, which are transcribed as ever by Angelica. Thanks very much, Angelica. If you'd like to consider giving a small donation and getting the transcriptions, you could have a look at Patreon. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Ingles podcast.
And we'd like to welcome our new Patreon supporters who have joined us this month. They are Geraldine Islas, Ramon Menocal, Esteban, and Rafael. Thank you very much for joining us and supporting us on Patreon. What's next week, Reza?
Next week's episode is about tongue twisters.
Join us next week. Thank you for listening this week. And until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.
Me get into character now. Just give me a moment, sir. Yes, I do declare I am ready to go.
Okay.
Embarrassing. I can't believe we're going to put our name to this. Oh dear. Howdy, partner. We're as pleased is a cowboy in a saloon that you've decided to tie up your horse and come on down and join us this week as we all go out west, take us a look at some cowboy vocabulary. Welcome to
Aprender inglês com Razor e Craig.